in 2015, in September 2015, 193 member states of the United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the General Assembly. And it has 5 main elements: people, prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace, also known as the 5 Ps. And at the heart of the Agenda 2030 are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action for all countries. So these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are aiming at broad-based economic growth, reflected in SDG number 8, game-changing innovations, SDG number 9, leveraging international partnerships, which we see in SDG number 17, and industry, innovation, and infrastructure, which is actually the SDG, which is in the core mandate of UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and also other SDGs. We will look into that a bit later. And in Canada, this led to the 2030 Agenda strategy, which is a whole of society approach to advance action on the SDGs, and was broken down to a federal implementation plan. So if we look into the SDG number 7, which is to ensure access to reliable, affordable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, we see that there are sub-targets. So all these SDGs, they have sub-targets. For example, the sub-target 7.2 is to increase the global percentage of renewable energy, or 7A to promote access to research, technology, investments in clean energy. Progress is being made towards the SDGs. For example, we see that from 2010 to 2020, the population without access to energy, it decreased from 1.2 billion to 733. So there is some progress made. But if we look to 7.2, the renewable energy share in the total final energy consumption, this only rose by 1.6% to 17.7%. I was told that it's over there, but it's really a bit tricky. So electrification remains low in parts of the world. We can see that from the map, that we have the largest underserved population with electricity in Africa. So 76% of the entire global population living without access to electricity are located in 20 countries. And most of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. And the largest underserved populations are in Nigeria, with 92 million people living without access to electricity. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 72 million, and Ethiopia, still also 56 million people without access to electricity, which is defined as having less than 4 hours of reliable energy per day. So, and the average age in these countries is in Nigeria, 17. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the average age is 15.5 years, and 18.5 in Ethiopia. So the population of the continent, which is in total like 54 countries, will double by 2050. And it's in our shared responsibility and in our own interest to ensure that this growing demand of energy, that it is not just only satisfied with coal and other fossil fuels, but also with innovative, reliable, and clean energy. And I think DRE can play an important role in this. So 3 scenarios how decentralized renewable energies can bridge the access deficit in Africa. Either there is no electric power at the moment, and renewable technologies can provide power in locations where the national grid hasn't yet reached, or where generators are too expensive. Or power from generators is there, and it can replace, the DRE solution can then replace costly and dirty energy from diesel generators, leading to cost savings and also to emission reduction. Or there is a power from the national grid, but it's not reliable, or it's extremely costly. So some examples examples of decentralized energy innovation, so decentralized energy innovations in in emerging markets, I would like to give on the following slides. So I've chosen through three. One is the mobile solar plants, or also called the solar tainer. The second example is a hybrid energy system for remote mining operations. And a third example is a solar-powered water kiosk. These are just three. I could list like 50 because we've just been to Uganda and Kenya to the refugee camps with 40 companies. So, but I could just, because of the time, select three. But I got some brochures. There are more examples, and I hope we speak afterwards about it. So this is a mobile solar plant in Mali, where the company introduced a sustainable energy solution to rural communities in Africa. They set it up in Mali, in Niger, and in Senegal. And this company moved its whole production now from Germany to Senegal recently, half a year ago. Now they are producing in Senegal to be closer to the markets and also to enable more jobs on site. So far, they have powered 100,000 people in 17 communities. And these solar systems, they are mobile, accessible, expandable. They're in a container. They can provide, generally they're different ones, but this one can provide energy up to 50 kilowatt peak. Generally provides electricity for 4,000 people, 40 commercial customers, and 10 communal facilities. And when it's brought there with the container, it's set up and ready to deliver electricity in just 48 hours. And what's also another good thing about this is that this containerized design enables to react when either the political situation in that country gets worse and the investors want the container to be drawn out, because this is not donor funded. It's investors going into this. And even we all can, with a crowd investing, contribute to this company. So either when there's political instability or the national grid reaches that community, this container can be brought out to another location. A second example is a solar hybrid system at a gold mine in Mali. And for this solution at the off-grid mine, which is called like Fekola mine, it's actually owned by a Canadian company, by the public gold producer B2Gold. It went to Wärtsilä Energy from Finland and partnered with the German company Suntrace and with BayWa Renewable Energies for this hybrid setup. And they have set up the world's largest off-grid solar battery system, which is used in a mine, and now produces up to 75% of the mine's electrical energy demand, and uses a 36 megawatt solar plant with 17 megawatt and has a battery storage of 15 megawatt. So up to 20% fuel savings was expected to be reached, and this has been already exceeded. And also another very positive side effect is a saving of 39,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. The third example is the solar-powered water kiosk in Kenya. This is a water desalination system. So actually the solar roof provides the energy to pump up the water from a 140-meter deep saline borehole, and the water comes up and produces like 2,000 liters of drinking water. Then they have set up a fish farm. They are doing irrigation farming because of the dry weather there. It makes sense to do the vertical farming with the drop irrigation. And it's also a feasible model because this is being sold. So it is a holistic business to customer approach. They sell 20 liters of water for a price of 70 euro cents. And for the population, this has led to really lower prices for the water, which is now less than 1/5 than before. And we see just a small water kiosk here, but actually this company, it's a startup from Berlin, Boreal Light, is now currently setting up Africa's largest solar water desalination project for health clinics and hospitals. So now they are building these kiosks for 31 hospitals and providing 1 million liters of hygiene drinking water per day, all just powered by solar. And well, I've chosen examples which are solar powered, but we can at the same time use a biogas example or a wind park. So just happened. So what's the role of UNIDO now in this, in driving innovation? For this, I would like to give a very brief overview about UNIDO to present the organization at a glance and the ITPOs, the Investment and Technology Promotion Offices. So UNIDO has 170 member states. Unfortunately, Canada is not a member anymore since 1993 when Canada left UNIDO. That's a pity, and we would love to see Canada back as a member. We have a budget of around 200 million euro for technical cooperation. UNIDO has 48 country offices globally and runs a network of investment and technology promotion offices. The oldest ITPO is from Tokyo, from Japan, and actually the youngest one is the German one, which was founded in 2017. The ITPO, Germany. So this is the building where we are located at the UN campus in Bonn, and right behind, it's not yet at the picture, it's the new climate tower of UNFCCC, of the climate change conference. And our mandate is to support investors and companies by facilitating technology transfer from industrialized countries to developing countries and economies in transition. So mainly we support German companies and European ones, but it could be also Canadian ones, because it is not about supporting the German company. The German company is more a vehicle to aim sustainable industrial development. So if we see from a Canadian company a good solution, it can be also supported. Like what means supported? That we're not funding, but we are mainly doing matchmaking. So matchmaking of technology providers, B2B, B2G, and business to institutions, using the UN network and matching partners with investors in emerging markets. We bring delegates from investment promotion agencies or companies to Germany, and we have advisors in 3 African countries. Also, we participate in huge trade fairs, like in the environmental sector and so on, often give the companies the floor to present their technologies. And I've got a brochure from this trip to the refugee camps. We speak about refugee camps where 250,000 or 400,000 people live. So there's a huge potential to replace diesel generators by solar panels. Quickly, just one activity which we did last year was the Global Call, a competition of innovators, a global call for innovative solutions in clean tech and sustainable land management. And there we teamed up with United Nations Climate Change, which is organizing the COP, and United Nations Framework Convention to combat desertification as well. So 2 other UN organizations and FCA, which we already heard. The goal was to identify readily deployable and scalable solutions to address the adverse effects of climate change. And we ran that competition in 4 categories, ranging from decarbonizing growing urban environments to over like circular production and industrial processes. And what's worth to mention is that a Canadian company, Run With It Synthetics, Myrna and Dean Bittner, maybe some of you know them, from Edmonton, Alberta, they were among the 4 winners out of 300 companies which applied. And we brought these companies to COP26, where we had actually Innovation Hub, which Google was hosting, and gave these companies visibility. So this is a clean tech innovation festival, Europe's most ambitious clean tech innovation festival, I would say, which we co-hosted, and it was organized by Future Clean Tech Architects. We took over one of the remaining industrial cities in Germany for 2 days with one objective, driving clean tech innovation. So what you see on the map is that, like, from the theater over the central library, city hall, startup center, we were running in parallel sessions all about clean tech innovation. And we see Anouk on the right-hand side in a panel about exceptional clean tech leaders. So this is Mayor's Hall and different event locations. Join us from June 5 to 7, 2023 for this Clean Tech Innovation Festival in Germany. And I really hope Anouk will come over. It will be an excellent opportunity to connect with clean tech innovators, with research tanks, with universities, with politics and so on from all over Europe. Secondly, I would like to use the opportunity to inform you about an upcoming Congress fair on off-grid with renewable energies. This is actually the only Congress fair in Europe that is purely focused on off-grid solutions with renewable energies. So follow us on LinkedIn. This is the UNIDA ITPO Germany account. And also, if you are a technology provider and you think you would like to showcase your technology, you can register at our investment and technology promotion platform to get in touch with other partners, with business partners, and you can present your technology or look for financing, look for business partners. So, okay, thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about workforce in Canada. I know that's not always, people think of HR and they think boring, it's cost center, that sort of stuff, but it's actually more interesting than that. And I think for those of you in Canada who've been watching the headlines recently, the workforce really is making a lot of headlines recently. And there's a number of reasons for that. At EHRC as an organization, we do workforce development in Canada's electricity industry. So we're, just to put that in perspective, who does what? How do they do it? Do they have the right skills? And do we have enough of those people in Canada's electricity industry to get the job done and ideally get us to net zero with an ambitious target of net zero in the electricity industry by 2035. Where we identify gaps, we work with partners to develop programs to respond to those gaps. So as an organization, that's what we do. Retirements in Canada, so we'll talk macro level. Heading into the pandemic, we were already starting to see the boomers leave the workforce. This last year, we went from 233,000 retirements last year across Canada to 300,000 already by the end of October. So we're looking at 100,000 more retirements than usual this year, and that's a result of people sticking around over the pandemic and suddenly leaving en masse. And our industry is not immune. Heading into the pandemic, we were actually 1.5 times the retirement rate for the rest of the economy, which is a little scary because we're also looking at growth. As a result of net zero policy, we're looking to lean on electrification. That means big build outs. It means DERs. It means a whole host of skills and a whole host of people at a time when we're already seeing the workforce knowledge capital start to dip, which is a challenge. On the post-secondary side, we've seen a big increase in the number of people entering university. Sort of stable, steady state on the college front, but that's largely being driven by international students. And unfortunately, on the trade side, particularly in the last 2 years, we've seen a big dip in the number of people registering in the accredited trades programs in Canada, which is a challenge. It's a big challenge. On the immigration note, in Canada, I don't know if anybody noticed recently, we're looking at 500,000 new immigrants per year over the course of the next several years coming into Canada. And we should be looking to that because as a country, none of us are having enough babies. And so as a result, I don't know if any of you have done your part, but unless you've had 2.1 children in your home, you're not having enough babies. And so we're actually relying heavily on immigration to continue to grow our population as a nation. And that means we need to find better pathways for those newcomers to Canada to come into this industry in particular. To Anouk's point, youth, we need to engage better. We've done some really interesting work on youth engagement over the course of the last little while. And what we've found is those youth who know about electricity, hyper engaged. They want to be part of this industry. They want to be part of climate change solutions. They want to help us get to net zero if they know what net zero even means. And by the way, if you're talking to a typical young person, don't use net zero. They don't know what you're talking about. If you say climate change and you're going to work to the solution, now you're speaking their language. And then the last thing, the reason that I bring that up and the reason I bring up immigration is time to competence. In this industry, we are a very technical industry. You've got technicians and technologists, you've got tradespeople, and you've got engineers. That makes up 82% of all occupations in this sector. And then the balance would be your typical business development. You've got HR, of course. You've got marketing, communications, services, like all of those sort of service professionals, that sort of the glue that keeps the company together at the end of the day, or the organizations together at the end of the day. But because it's so technically competent, the time to competence is 5 years minimum for most of the roles in the industry. 10 years if you happen to be in nuclear. So for SMRs, we have a lot of work to do to get that workforce in place, particularly if we're looking at regions outside of Ontario or New Brunswick.
Yeah, the project development role. So, we actually had 5 interns. We're looking at kind of coaching into this role over last year, and you talked about quality, and 3 of the 5 were female, and they worked out great, and 2 of them came back to us. So that's wonderful. But it's not so much specialized that you come out of a post-secondary or even a trade college that we would sub all that work out. We're looking for somebody with more general knowledge of how the systems work. So it's a little bit of a different, it's a little bit of a unique role. What it does is it requires kind of training and development within the organization. So that's when I talked about retention, because really you don't see that return until they've had experience and they've worked with other engineers that do this work. And we have a complete development and training program within our organization to build them up as they go through, develop their career within training. So it's very generalized, yet really wide. And there's no post-secondary course that kind of covers that stuff. So,
Not yet.
not yet.
I mean,
For me, and my few of my colleagues would believe, education and training capacity development is a lifelong journey, that begins within a daycare and continues up to our elders, who our elders are our knowledge keepers, and they share that information with the youth, so it's circular and everything's interconnected. So for me, doing this type of work in regards to addressing climate issues is very important, as like I said, that connection we have, that ancestral practices we did with Mother Nature and the environment are very important, because we realize that the renewable sector, energy efficiency is practices we've been doing before. Within my tribe, we definitely feel it's very important to get our members trained, but also be a part of the design and also the installation of certain initiatives and programs within our community. And that works very well for us, because it allows our members to be part of the work that's being done, but it also gives them that pride of ownership, to know that they were part of something that created on a program for for example, a renewable energy program. For me, I took it a few steps further and started doing consultation with a couple of post-secondaries in Northern Alberta here in regards to doing exchange programs, where our local college in Muskwachees will do introductory into cultural language and history, and then they will bring introductory programs into renewable and energy efficiency. So it's those type of partnerships that are very important for us to make that move, but also create the partnerships and collaborations with Canadians and other provinces alike, which works toward the understanding of truth and reconciliation and the importance of treaties. I think the treaties have a huge impact of who we are within this country, as this is a very important agreement, not only to myself as a First Nation, but I believe Canadian citizens alike can also benefit from everything that's within a treaty, because you are, as Canadian citizens, are signatories to the agreement and should have fundamental access to all the human rights that come within the treaties. So if we look at something in regards to how can we build that partnership, how can we work on that collaboration, it's written right there in black and white, written over 100 years ago. And I think we just got to, look at that agreement a bit more fundamentally in regards to making that just transition. But for me, when we do programs within our community, we definitely invite people that are non-First Nations to join our programs, and we do a cultural immersion where members actually partake in pipe ceremonies, they partake in sweat ceremonies, eat traditional meals. Our kids come out with their powwow regalia and music and do performances for them. That goes such a long way in regards to, the goal and initiatives of calls of action toward truth and reconciliation. So, for me as First Nations, a big part of us in regards to moving from the impact of residential schools and intergenerational trauma is healing. But we realize, I realize as a First Nation that healing feeling has to be coordinated with the Canadian citizens alike to reach that goal. And I think working toward climate issues and being involved in regards to being that workforce is a huge opportunity for First Nations. I mean, we have the biggest unemployment rates in all our First Nation communities, and there's a huge opportunity to access that manpower and have that ability for our youth, which is actually a huge population in many of these communities, to be a part of that movement. So I definitely, for me, I'm very supportive of my community members being involved, but also the importance of why they're doing this type of work.
And Chief, well, just to sort of dig into that a little bit more, like if you had a recommendation for folks in the room who maybe haven't previously done work in Indigenous community or in partnership with Indigenous communities, like what would you suggest? How would you suggest they start?
Well, for me, I think it's very important. The simplest thing you can do is just reach out to your neighboring First Nation community, Métis or Inuit people, and start that discussion. Begin that discussion there with the grassroots people, and slowly build up to where you want to see that type of partnership and collaboration. But a lot of it, like I said, is just to reach out to somebody, because there's one thing that I see and realize is that First Nations are not going to go knock on people's doors and promote themselves as a kind of a platform or anything like that. I think it starts first with discussions, and I think we as like I said, First Nation, Indigenous, and Inuit people, we're very visual people. We're very hands-on. So the best thing to do, like I said, is reach out to your neighbors and have those discussions right there.
Thanks, Chief Paul.
Interesting. I picked up something the chief is saying about showing the value that they bring, to the business, and I think that's probably one of the most important things. And we talked about Gen Z and millennials, and what I've learned is this isn't it's not like your parents' economy where you work at one company all your life. Gen X millennials, they need to be reinforced what value they bring, and it has to be quite clear their contribution and the impact that contribution makes to the overall success of the project or the company. And they have to be in line with the values of the organization, and that's not the values that you put up in the wall of the boardroom, but it's the ones that you kind of live and act every day. And those values are showing the millennials and Gen X that you might think it might appear to be a bit of a millennial task, but here's how important that is into the bigger picture. And without that task, we can't get this accomplished. And when they start feeling that sense of ownership and value of their contribution, that's where they really buy into the company and buy into the role, buy into the position, that they're going to stay there for a long time as long as you maintain that.
Tammy, you look like you wanted to jump in on that one.
Yeah, there was some research done by the Work Learn Institute prior to the pandemic, and it showed that about half of early talent would not take a full-time job if it matched their skill sets but not their values. So let that sink in a bit. So imagine for the hiring managers in the room, for HR, if half of your time was wasted, think of all that economic loss, right, in terms of the recruitment process. So I echo everything Daryl says. The generation that really is looking for that impact. And I think a lot of people in here are going to be able to, I think, believe in that and live by that. I think the challenge will be marketing that appropriately to Gen Z in the channels where they are actually looking for that content. So for example, for all of you in this room, if you are not already talking to your marketing team, if you're lucky enough to have one, and posting on social media about being at this session right now and how important it is to invest in youth and early talent to get them into the sector, you're already falling behind. I'm not trying to scare you, but this is where they're going. I read a stat recently that Gen Z is looking on TikTok for information, not Google. So think about that. So if you're not utilizing TikTok as a channel for content, that's something you have to start doing. So there's a lot of creative energy that needs to happen as well in that space to really connect with Gen Z so that they start to associate your organization, your commitment, the lived values of, being at conferences like this with what they're resonating with at an individual level. I have to give kudos to Gen Z right now because I think they're so self-aware, they're so intentional. They have such a level of scrutiny for calling people out and organizations for not sticking by their corporate values. And we have to start taking that seriously, because if you do not, the tech sector is going to win, the finance sector is going to win, manufacturing, electricity, insurance, you're all going to get left behind, right? It's a talent war right now, and I don't see that changing.
Like I mentioned before, within the treaties, we have that it's written in there, the importance of duly to consult, which is a consultation. And too many times, government or industry or even education, the consultation practices them just coming by and saying, well, I went and said hello, I checked the box, I did my consultation. But consultation can go so much further in regards to just creating that collaboration partnership, but creating a community, lifelong growth in regards to where we see ourselves in the industry. And like, Ed mentioned before, there's a huge manpower workforce that is just sitting there, just waiting to be a part of something in regards to industry. Too many times as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we've been left out of industry growth, and a lot of times we're playing catch up. So, for me to be on a platform like this and advocate for the importance of having those discussions, with First Nations people, we talk about the lack of manpower within this country in regards to industry growth and economical growth. It's right there in front of you. First Nations people want to be involved. So we got to have those conversations, and we got to start having those conversations. And I think more importantly, we got to get past the understanding that, our history is a big part of who we are, including as Canadian people. And we got to look at developing a curriculum that showcases the history of what happened with Indigenous people. I think there's that stigma that's put in place that it's hard to approach a First Nation because of the atrocities that occurred to them and the colonialization that happened. So for me, like I said, it's consultation goes so much further in regards to just not only creating partnerships and collaborations, but working on that necessity of truth and reconciliation and healing toward that common goal of working within a treaty understanding, that we are in this together. We are supposed to be working together on this land, share these resources, but also maintain an environment and a country that will allow our next generations to flourish. But in order for that to happen, I believe it has to be done in collaboration and partnership, with the First Nations people under the treaties.
We have engaged with First Nations. We do a lot of work at the federal level as well. And it's very important to have a partnership in order to actually respond to some of these RFPs at the federal level. So we're always trying to find different ways and different partnerships and finding those skill sets. And there are a lot of unique Indigenous businesses, are really contracting businesses all through. The most recent one I did was in Edmonton. And, I looked at, I think it's called the IBC, Indigenous Business Direct, IBD, Indigenous Business Directory. And it was amazing at how many electrical companies, solar companies, construction companies, road companies that are already registered and certified. And it's very easy to pick up the phone and call them up and partner on bids and work. We've done that. It works.
Different ways I see partnership from the academic perspective. So I think working with community organizations, I had a call a couple of weeks ago with an Indigenous organization that looking to get academic partners to sign up to say, hey, would you be willing to sign a letter of intent saying that you would like to collaborate on, getting sources of funding for the organization, and where we could commit is maybe partnering with this Indigenous organization in terms of, encouraging youth to get into post-secondary and any connections that we have, can we bring that to the table, which I think we have an obligation, and altruistically we should be doing that. One of the things we're starting to look at, so we have a new Markham campus being built, and one of the innovative programs that's coming out of that is called Digital Technologies. And so it's a very unique model. It's going to be the first of its kind in Canada, where the student is hired full-time by a company. The company pays a full-time salary. The student works 80% of the time with the employer, and then 20% of the time is spent learning on campus, so in 6-week intervals. So it's a unique model because it removes financial barriers. Because I like to use myself as an example. If I'm 38 years old, I have 2 kids, I don't feel like I can take the pay cut to go back to school to learn computer science or something more technical, even though I know there's financial wealth in that type of industry. So this kind of removes the financial barrier because the company's paying for the salary and tuition, so there's no loss in income, there's no sacrifice there. And so something that we've been thinking about in terms of attracting also like Indigenous students to that program, and I'm not sure where this is all going to land, but we're trying to look at, are there ways that we can be creative as an academic institution in terms of going to where the communities are without necessarily pulling the students away from their families? So that's one thing we're looking at. I'm not sure if it'll be feasible or not, but we're investigating it. The other options are if we do have to go to a model where we do have to have students, come to campus, et cetera, how are the other supplemental costs being covered in terms of housing or transit, in terms of community support and safety for those individuals that come to our campus? So those are all things that I think we're starting to look at very seriously, because my perspective, and I think the university's perspective, it's not just about getting jobs, it's about creating safe spaces in those employment spaces for those students.
I think one of the bigger obstacles is in how we do curriculum development. I think we got to change the dynamics of how we and what we're teaching our youth. I honestly believe the importance of literacy and numeracy, and definitely the curriculum how it is right now. But we got to address this big concern that climate change is real. And if we don't address it as a priority, then where does that leave us? I always mention when the pandemic hit, international community, they reacted so quickly. Everybody was on board. Everybody did their part. Why can't we address climate change in that same fashion? Make that a priority. But I think in order for that to happen, we've got to change the dynamics of how we do education, and make that a reality that we got to work toward this environment and make it clean and effective for those future generations. My communities and colleagues and other chiefs, we always talk about those next 7 generations. We want to look out for that 7th generation to ensure that everything is good for them as it should be. I myself, not only as the chief, I formed a small company with some friends because it was important to begin conversations regards to consultation and bringing those discussions to industry, education, and government of how we can work in regards to consultation practices, but include also the importance of creating programs that work toward cultural orientation, cultural appropriation, but also on the other end of the spectrum, we'll work with First Nation communities to help them make that shift to work into society. Because when we live in a First Nation community where we're kind of segregated from everyone, everything else in society. So when a member leaves the community, it's a culture shock for them, and vice versa. When a person comes up to the First Nations, they don't know how to do the work with that community, because certain protocol and practices have to be in place. The most important thing I could probably share with everyone, if you're going to be approaching a First Nation, bring protocol. The simplest thing as bringing tobacco to a leader or an elder, goes so much further in regards to that understanding and respect. So, those are things that, like I said, I think that are important to me in regards to the question you had asked.
There is limited resources when it comes to technical personnel and resources. And when I say technical, I don't just mean engineering, but electricians. You talk about the electrification. Well, a core resource, and probably, I don't know what percentage of the actual man hours in any project would go to a certified electrician. It's not the engineers will be 10, 15%, the developers, the project folks, the project managers. But at the end of the day, it's those core trades that we need. And I don't know the best way to integrate or expand on those core trade programs. When you talked about the enrollment was down with some of those trade programs, that's concerning because it's bad enough as it is now. And if that's the case, the demand's going to go up, and the supply is continually fall. So, and we're talking about kind of the jobs you mentioned earlier that's coming up in the electrification field, that there's no way that we're going to be able to fill all those roles. So as a result, we're not going to get them. We're not going to achieve some of the goals and some of the climate initiatives that we're planning. So.
I think I alluded earlier to the K-12. We still are going to have that constant challenge of getting, females more into the technical programs. I think that's all something we're trying to combat right now. I think there's smaller wins in terms of interdisciplinary programs where I think a lot of the content can start to be introduced in faculties like environmental and urban change that are going to solve a lot of the problems we have today and start to embed technical components there. I think maybe on behalf of students leaving university, I think the thing that I get nervous about is rightfully so, their awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if this sector has had the strongest history with that. And I don't know if it's because of the percentage of technical roles in the past, but I think it's something to be very mindful of when working with this next generation is they're going to want to see women represented in the workforce. They're going to want to see people of color represented in the workforce or other equity deserving groups. And I don't know if we've made a lot of progress in that area. And so I think that's something to kind of work together on. I think I get nervous for, I think, management's expectations. I think, Daryl, I think you commented you're doing a lot of great things already at Train. What entices a Gen, Zer to work now at a company is very different than I think what any of us experienced when we were looking for jobs, right? I think the mentality when we were looking for work was you're lucky to have a job, so you better just be grateful. And I think today's generation growing up, they have a lot more self-direction. I think a lot more self-reflection on what they're looking for in work and that impact that Daryl alluded to. And so I think it's become a lot more complicated with the pandemic and the related effects in terms of the menu or even the cafeteria, let's say, of what needs to be offered to entice this next generation to come work for you. So it might not just be as simple as hybrid work or remote work or in-person work. I think there's other complications in terms of mentorship or employee resource groups or other sponsorship programs to kind of help elevate staff to get through the company and for them to believe genuinely that the employer is invested in their career development. I think, there's been a paradigm shift where I think in the past it was the employers posting jobs, here's what you're going to do. And they just expected applications, and that worked in the past. I think nowadays, I think employers have to very much craft a story about what they're offering to candidates. How are they going to genuinely invest in their career development? And I don't know if everyone buys into that yet. And so I think for the ones that are struggling with that, I think your companies potentially could take longer and have more challenges with attracting the next generation, because I think tech's figured it out. Finance has figured it out. And so we have to get all these other industries on board with that mentality shift.
Just the realization of where we are and what we have to do, it's attracting a lot more people. So a lot more people, we heard over the last couple of days and, they were into different industries and they decided to get into clean tech. They decided to get into this. Now they're in finance and they moved over. So just the realization of the situation that we're in and our challenge to get to net zero, I think a lot more people are going to kind of pick up the baton and say, okay, I want to be part of the industry. I want to be part of the solution, and especially with the Gen X and millennials. And so I'm pretty optimistic about that. Hopefully we don't have to get it too much more dire before we get more people in. So
I hope so too. Chief Bull?
For me, I believe that we got to take down a lot of these barriers that really confide us from not really wanting to work together. I think it shouldn't matter where you originated from. It shouldn't matter your background, your social standing. I think the common interest of knowing that we got to do better for ourselves as a human species is fundamentally more important than who we are as a social standing or a background of who we're from. I think we got to look through that type of lens, and I'm hoping when it's these type of conversations and this type of platform, that brings that light on those type of issues. And I think once we get past those barriers, things such as wanting to get a net zero or wanting to address climate issues, are more fundamentally happen more and flow more smoothly once we get past those concerns that hinder a lot of us. Thank you.
Tammy.
I'm very hopeful that Gen Z is going to save us. They have to.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure on that generation, but they have to. We can't do it without their help. And they're the most, I think, impact driven and mission driven generation that's out there. I think they have grown up just so used to technology. Like, think of how fast the iPhone changes models, right? Like, they're just used to, going through changes constantly. They didn't see the longer shifts and technological changes that we experienced, even when I think of having the landline, going to payphones, like they haven't experienced any of that. They just know instant speed and they know instant customization. And so I think their mindset and approach, I think, is going to be very critical to, I think, solving kind of the net zero challenge. So I'm very optimistic when I see the student projects, when I see industry challenges thrown to the students, I see them delivered. So I have no doubts in my mind they can do it. I think it's about people in this room also like opening the challenge to that generation and seeing what they're capable of. So I am hopeful. I have to be, because I have 2 young children that are 4 and 7. They're both girls. So I have to be hopeful that we're making progress and we're going to continue to do so that they can have a better life.
And so this project is a 2-prong Prong 1 is 3-phase. Prong 2, we're working with the CSA group to develop a national technical specification, which is currently in development. It will go to public consultation, I believe, early next year. And it's been a very interesting process getting to work with the folks in that group and see how these things come to be is quite interesting work. So phase 1 began September last year. We acquired a standard steering committee, which was made up of 12 leaders in, Indigenous engagement. We had utilities, project developers, some people from government. And so that group helped kind of inform the first part of this project. So what we had done was a standards landscape review, which basically was me scouring the SCC website, trying to find what standards were happening in Canada, were adopted in Canada as it relates to the decentralized energy space. So what we found, we used 45 keywords to search the standards landscape in Canada, and we did identify 10 that were related to decentralized energy. And of course, with the Canadian Electrical Code being the most valuable document, namely Section 64, the Renewable Energy System section. So what we found was there are actually only 2 standards that come from the International Standards Organization, or the ISO, that have been adopted in Canada as it relates to sustainability. So one of them, and get ready for all the acronyms and numbers, ISO TS 37107 2019, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities, Maturity Model for Smart Sustainable Communities, and ISO 37100 2016, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities, which is a vocabulary document. So the scope of our analysis, Anouk kind of gave a really high level introduction to that. So I'll just go over for those who may not be in the room. So policies are a set of statement of principles, values, and intentions that outline expectations and provide a basis of consistent decision-making and resource allocation in respect to specific issues. Policies are chief tools of governance. However, they are only documents and they are not laws, but they can relate to lead to new laws. Acts are legislation and they're forms of law that provide the authority to make regulations. Regulations are rules that are used to carry out the intent of acts and are instruments of legislative power and have the force of law. Regulations also provide more specific guidelines than acts. I feel like we're in Ottawa, so this was like needed to have this baseline here. And then the last 2, of course, are codes. So codes are sets of rules that serve as generally accepted guidelines recommended for the industry to follow. They exist for the purpose of safety, quality, or other benefits. So for example, electrical codes exist to ensure system reliability and that building occupants are safe from shock risks. On its own, a code is not a law that must be followed, but can be adopted into a law or included in a business contract. Each code specifies the minimum acceptable requirements for electrical process or for the performance of a final system itself, and codes may incorporate or refer to existing standards or specifications. And then of course we get to our standard, a document that provides a set of agreed upon rules. So as Chantal mentioned this morning, this idea of collaboration and industry input, and that's how all of this work has been informed, is really just DEC acting as the facilitators of everybody's input, advice, recommendations, all those types of things. So standards establish accepted best practices, technical requirements, and terminologies for diverse fields. Most standards aim to achieve an optimum degree of order in any given context. And because standards are easy to recognize and reference, they enable organizations to ensure that their products or services can be manufactured, implemented, or sold around the world. Thank you, SCC, for that lovely definition. So moving on with this work, Vanessa gave us a really nice introduction as well to the Sustainable Development Goals earlier this afternoon. And so part of this work that we are doing is trying to ensure that these SDGs are being referenced, acknowledged, and incorporated into the set of standards that we are going to recommend for the decentralized energy space here in Canada. So of course, good health and well-being, gender equality, affordable and clean energy definitely makes sense in the decentralized energy space. And then of course, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reducing inequalities, creating sustainable cities. Of course, that circular economy conversation that continually needs to happen, climate action, which is a given, and then of course, partnership for the goals. So part of our analysis and results from our first and second round of this project, some of the things that came back from us from our steering committee was that there's definitely some definitional awareness problems. So this is a big component of the work we're doing with the CSA group, is creating a national technical specification of definitions so that everybody's using the same lexicon and all being on the same page. So when we're talking about decentralized energy and health, Halifax versus Haida versus Iqaluit, and even with our international partners, either in Texas or the Caribbean or Africa, everybody is using the same standardized definitions and lexicon, so we're all on the same page. So it came back to us that decentralized energy suffers a definitional awareness problems, and in some respects, it becomes a catch-all term that's poorly understood. Decentralized energy is at risk of getting lost in the shuffle as a solution to energy issues in Canada, and existing power centers in the electricity sector are definitely not helping that. So concerns surrounding utilities and energy stakeholders. There's been a few conversations about that over the last 2 days when you have mandates that state cheap, affordable power for all, and there isn't really that conversation of clean or renewable or community benefit really. So these are things that we need to be aware of as we start recommending standards to Standards Council Canada. So the roundtable process revealed that questions surrounding how utilities and energy stakeholders can incorporate the needs of energy consumers and improve engagement and decision making, and how to integrate equity into rates, revenue, market design, as well as equity implications and decoupling revenue from sales. And then lastly, jurisdictional barriers play a key role in the widespread dissemination of decentralized energy in Canada. So a really good example, we had somebody on our steering committee from NB Power, and they were talking about, having conversations about the Atlantic Loop project, and how there was issues because Nova Scotia and New Brunswick weren't even using the same electrical code. So it's really hard to work collaboratively when not everybody is working off the same documents and pages. So some of the recommendations that were suggested by our steering committee as far as what we can do to create this roadmap. So ensuring that we're valuing the locational benefits of decentralized energy in our standards. So the strategic positioning of decentralized energy systems increases transfer efficiency, reduces emissions, and decreases energy costs. So additionally, by shifting generation from centralized energy to decentralized energy, the energy sector will open up a broad array of power source options and will accelerate our energy transition to a diversified, robust, and resilient energy system. Effective standards that address SDG 7, 11, and 12 and 13 must also consider the economic valuation, planning, and regulatory considerations for assessing locational value, primarily in their role of deferring, mitigating, or eliminating the need for infrastructure investments in an effort to strengthen community resilience. We need to value the diversity of supply as well. So the diversification of energy supply will enable our society to mitigate the impacts of disruption in one energy input by increasing the use of other energy sources. Energy diversification will ensure continued energy security, which is always very important, while providing a breeding ground for entrepreneurship, innovation, and research and development. Energy security ensures economies can function without disruption and provides citizens with adequate access to reliable and affordable supplies of modern and clean energy. The components of energy security include physical availability, technology development, economic affordability, social accessibility, and governance. And of course, valuing the social benefits of decentralized energy. So decentralized energy can deliver a range of economic benefits to local communities, including social ones, which include increased autonomy, empowerment, and resilience by providing long-term income and local control over finances, often in areas where few options for generating wealth occur. So this will be seen, I believe, very strongly, especially in the North and in other Indigenous communities that can take on, economic reconciliation is really important to this as well. So other benefits include opportunities for education, which we also saw just in the last panel as well, as strengthen sense of place and increase in visitors to areas, because of course sometimes these projects also can be educational tools that people are excited to go see as well. So there's a great deal of interest in these issues, but very little formal measurement of social benefits for these assets. Therefore, effective measurement of social returns would provide useful evidence to support a more favorable policy and funding environment. So why do we need standards? As we have learned today, the standards are going to provide a very important feedback loop that is informed by industry needs and demands. Standards will play a key role in aiding an equitable energy transition and intersect with many other areas. And so misinformation and misalignment to social benefits a major barrier to progress. So a substantial gap that must be addressed by standards include the integration of the sustainable development goals, such as affordable clean energy, reduced inequalities, and responsible consumption and production. An important knowledge gap relates to the full life cycle of energy in its various forms. And another knowledge gap includes the relationship between electrification and energy efficiency policies and housing justice issues, which David Dodge has really driven home this last 2 days as well. So in short, the current standards in Canada failed to recognize the role that decentralized energy plays in the immediate societal demands for just energy transition, and there is an urgent need for action if we are able to achieve Canada's current federal commitments. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really great event, and it's been nice getting to meet you all. Thanks again.
So why do communities really matter, and why, for me, are they the common theme? We all know that they really are on the front line when it comes to climate change, right? The impacts of climate change are felt locally. They are where implementation happens. Regardless of what technological solution you're talking about, implementation occurs in communities. They are where local integration happens, which increases reliability and increases affordability. They matter because net zero is as much about social change as it is about technological change. And they matter because they are actually in the driver's seat. And I think it's not well understood yet that they are in the driver's seat. I don't know if they intentionally put themselves in the driver's seat, but by leading with the development of community energy and emissions plans, they are now in the driver's seat.
From our perspective, and maybe it's less about, well, I don't want to be a negative Nancy and about what's missing and more so what's wrong, but we continue to subsidize fossil fuels. We continue to subsidize the use of fossil fuels, which makes it so difficult to have a competitive low carbon option. We've faced that at ZB. It's been really challenging. Quebec has a stable energy policy, but Ontario's energy policy changes with the wind, it seems. Fortunately, we have great municipal partners on the project, but it's really difficult. The assumption is that a community is going to need a gas pipeline, that we're going to need gas infrastructure. To the point where one of the most satisfying conversations that I've had in my career so far was with a local gas supplier who called for this standard conversation about the right of way for the high capacity gas pipeline that would, of course, need to come in to ZB. And it was really satisfying to say, you know what, we don't actually need that. But that's just the norm. That's what's assumed. Full disclosure, we have gas for backup generators and for commercial restaurant purposes, but we don't need a high capacity gas pipeline. So I think the challenge is that it's difficult financially to have a low carbon solution.
Thanks. Tim.
I guess I kind of found my way into a conversation in a hallway there with you and somebody else, Tanya. And I think, when I look at this a little more on a sort of a high level, I think about a municipality and I think about sort of the limited range of lots of opportunity, but limited expertise in a lot of areas. And that whole idea And then let's take this up another step. When we look at provincial governments and we look at federal governments, you know, here we are, here's the magic bullet. Let's go hydrogen, let's go this, let's go this. And there's just a smarty box full of different solutions and really and truly best practices. I'm sorry for going a little on a tangent here, but best practices sometimes aren't the best practices. They're kind of copy and paste solutions. And I think when I look at organizations like the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and I look at the opportunity for them to start to, if you may, grow the understanding and the ability to integrate and to align and to define where they want to go. So when we're talking about sustainability and, you know, net zero is a great goal, but sustainability probably is more of the overarching piece on this whole thing. So, you know, understanding sort of at a greater depth and providing some of the tools to be able to work through those processes and being able to find the instruments for federal and provincial government in encouragement, whether it be through grant programs, whether it be through education, whether it be legislation. How do you enable that? And how can they sort of adopt non-traditional solutions into things? And how do we grow those things? So I think we're probably at the cusp of needing to get somewhere. I don't know whether acceleration is the word here as much as is understanding alignment. And when you get that alignment, you start to get some solutions. I know it's higher level, but I think there's a sort of a deep issue in there that really has to be addressed.
Yeah, I'll pick up on the alignment theme again, because I think it's a really good one. And has been mentioned a couple times, you know, municipalities are leaders for having community energy plans. And in many cases, and in Ottawa's case, the community energy plan starts with a model. So, you know, okay, what do you want to do? Well, we want to respect Ottawa doing its part to achieve no more than 1.5 degrees of global heating. And then it all just works backwards. So what do you have to do? And then you go into all the sources of emissions, the energy that's associated with them, and make a detailed plan. And I think that's just so valuable. You know, you're mentioning off the cuff ideas, and having ideas is great. But I think you know, when you can look at how they square with a plan that's worked to optimize everything that can be done, then all the actions can align well with emissions reductions and important secondary goals, social equity, reconciliation, and things of that nature. But I've really started pushing the idea of having a plan. And a few years ago, New England came out with Net Zero New England, done by Energy Futures Group. And that was regional. I went, oh, good. Somebody is taking this to the next level, because this is the next level it has to go to. It's interesting and goes with the theme of today, that's starting at the municipal level, but it's reinforcing the idea of having integrated plans so that all our actions have great alignment and we get somewhere quickly.
Sometimes it's hard, like our smart grid project started with a private sector developer who was doing some innovative stuff on financing, trying to use private capital to do the project. And then it kind of hit a wall when it went to the OEB. So that kind of regulation that was talked about in some of the other sessions comes up. And if we can provide a stable framework that can unlock capital, then we can really achieve some things at scale. Like if the businesses know here's the playing field and can see that pathway, then the money will flow, the projects will happen. But we have to really unlock that by making it very clear and the regulations open for this to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I would just say also that you know, the challenges we're having with Bill 23 and what happened to our official plan are just two things. Like I could be here for quite a while. But on the official plan, I mean, and Bill 23, I'll preface it by saying this has all happened very quickly and very recently. So the official plan, we have, you know, some of my colleagues are going through it and looking at everything that changed. So, I mean, an official plan in Ontario has to be approved by the province. And it can, of course, come back with changes. And we knew some were coming. We knew some things were being referred to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and we're getting ready to see what would happen with that. And there's quite a bit in it that we're combing through carefully. So a lot of cases, and, you know, this would go to knowing standards and codes almost, In a lot of cases, a word in the plan was shall, and we're noting it's now should. Well, you know, in terms of impacts, there's a big difference between those two words. So we're going through that. The boundary expansion, and remember, Ottawa's a huge municipality, right? It goes way out into the rural area. So when we talk about a boundary expansion, we're talking about the urban boundary. And that was a huge topic when the plan was developed. And there was a bit of pushing to make it slightly bigger, but now it's quite a bit bigger. So that's certainly a cause for pause on that one. I mean, I think the only saving grace is that adding the rural land into the urban area for prospective development is a two-step process. One being the official plan that's happening now, and the other involves, and I'm not a land use planner, but involves the approval of property parcels as we have them delineated as a city into the urban area as they're deemed required. So a small saving grace is that's not the last word. There has to be something of a use case for it, but it certainly impacts things. On Bill 23, the big impact is on the City of Ottawa's high performance development standard. So that's akin to Toronto's green standard, very, very similar, same general concept. There's tiers for performance better than Ontario Building Code, and it's considerably optional. For the most part, it's optional. I think the bottom level of actions, which are mandatory, are kind of no-brainers, like pretty well most reasonable builders and developers would be into doing them, and then optional beyond there. I talked to the planner who was working on the development of the standard today, actually, because I want to be up on the impacts. We think where it affects plan of subdivision, where there's a community energy plan, there won't be an impact. But where there's site plan approval for buildings, a lot of infill that's being discussed for Ottawa, it seems it's off the table there. And I think that's a real shame. If somebody just wants to go to the bottom tier, the cost impact is a fraction of a percent. The top tier, okay, you might be into maybe 4 or 5% impact in the upfront cost. And of course, upfront cost is not total cost of ownership, which is always a wash or an improvement by using any of the tiers in our high performance development standard. So that has to, we don't have much time to appeal this. I think our odds are long that this would get turned around, but it sure would be nice if it could.
You're right. It's across the country. I think, fundamentally there's a push-pull all the time. It's like development kind of drives activity and, market demand and all that kind of stuff. The simple answer, and there's a number of communities I know, Saskatoon is one. Another one is Medicine Hat, I think, that has about 3,500 acres. And now we're getting into land banking. So the wonderful answer and part of that is, you know what, you can legislate all you want. We own the land. We're going to do what we want to do. And I mean, that's simple, and it's not possible in a larger municipality, but we can define what we want. But also some of the tools available. And again, our little department is responsible for economic development, also land use planning, and also land banking. So when I look at, the building bylaw can define certain standards that need to occur within the context of what's going to happen within an area, including areas that are going to be for infill. Like we can actually define that there's going to be certain things that happen within that, and we're going to use those. We would use those instruments to make sure that that happens. Within the context of a development plan. By the way, for those this is the boring bureaucratic stuff, by the way, really boring, but it's really important because it hits you in the head like a sledgehammer if you don't pay attention to it. And it really affects private sector entry into a lot of markets, and they wonder why it doesn't happen. So when we look at when you have a development plan for a community, it defines the use of the land. It tells you what it's going to be. It goes through a whole process. I know it varies a little from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That's followed by a zoning bylaw, and that says what you can put in those things and what kind of, whether it's going to be residential, multifamily, a whole bunch of other things. So being able to understand and leverage those instruments is really, really important. So I think when we, again, let's jump back to things like FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Let's start to instruct and provide the toolkit that we need to be able to do. And let's sort of step around. Let's not react to stuff. Let's strategically react to things. So, saying, oh no, we have a Bill 37, by the way. And Bill 37 is not kind of the same tone, but it's basically saying that a municipality, if they make a decision, there's kind of a right on a planning issue to go to a non-elected board that'll sort of for an appeal. And we're saying that's crap. But it goes through, and it's kind of a development pressure that we have to be aware of. The other thing that's really important, getting to the front end of this, is know what you are as a community, define what you are, and get ahead of it. These things are going to happen. So start to prepare the way you build this forward. And, for example, on some of the other things, we've actually put in place, and not to my credit, to the guy I work for, basically said, and it's paranoia. Sometimes is a good thing to sort of instill into this. Not that he's paranoid, but anticipate worst case scenarios and start to make sure that you make as close to bulletproof as you possibly can and where you want to be as a community. And that really ties into knowing what you are as a community and then defining that and working with partners, folks like you. I mean, I spend a ton of my time working with private sector folks, whether it be companies that are looking to invest, whether it be new technology, stuff along that lines, because there's an integration opportunity here. I better know what's going on. I better know how that's going to help us move forward. Anyways.
Super. Yeah, thanks. Ashley, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're developing, right? You're developing a whole community. So we've kind of called out developers, perhaps in a negative light here. Do you want to comment on that? No, not you. Not you.
No, I'm sorry. I got to say that we've got a great working relationship with developers. Developers, if you're articulate of what you are as a community, they'll play. It's not about saying they're evil. They're not. They're really important and they're great to work with. But if you don't have a sense of identity, it's like, go for it. I mean, like when your household, your kids, are going to say, hey, just have fun, guys.
Well, I think Ashley's going to be, I think Zibby is exemplary of a developer that is, in the best interest of the community, broadly speaking. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no offense taken at all, because either my employer has pulled the wool over my eyes or not, but we're not your typical developer. Sustainability, reducing our impact on the planet has always been at the heart and the motivation behind the founding partners of ZB. That's been the case. That's why we are redeveloping in the downtown core at astronomical costs. This new bill is really disheartening. It's really challenging. In a former life, I worked in resource management. Taking away the power from the conservation authorities is really difficult. And so I think for us, it's frustrating to see this kind of change because it's a change in the wrong direction from our perspective. And we're able to show that you can develop smartly in either redevelopment on brownfields in central locations. You can have affordable housing in the downtown core as well too.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot. Tom, do you want to add in anything about Bill 23?
Yeah, I was just going to say that local land use planning, and I guess that's that term local is there, right? And having that deep understanding of your community and knowledge of the way things are in your community and how you want it to grow and how you want it to develop is a local thing, right? And having your strategic plans, your community energy plans, all those things you put effort into to develop your community. It's one of the most impactful things, your land use policy, in terms of how your community is going to function for the next 25, 50 years. And so you need to have control of that as a local municipality.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So coming back to the question that I asked about what's missing, I think what you didn't hear in any of that was regulatory changes, those kind of things, right? So what's missing is an awareness and acknowledgement of the hard work that communities have been doing, that they have a vision for how their community is going to develop over time. And they are developing culture. And that is what actually draws in a lot of the net zero community solutions that we've been talking about over the last few days.
I was just going to say that, working with partners like Quest, FCM, NRCan, taking advantage of the knowledge and the resources that are out there and the stakeholders that have expertise in this area has been really important for our community. And, we're looking at we're just kicking off a deep energy retrofit program. Other communities have done like the PACE type programs. But we're able to build on the knowledge, and other communities are really great about sharing, their war stories and their information. So I think in terms of solution, there's a lot we can look to by working collaboratively with organizations and other communities to advance these solutions that are going to have a significant impact on the community.
Tim?
I'll be succinct as well. Collisions are great. Collisions actually, and it's used a lot in the private sector where it drives kind of innovation and solutions. And, I think communities have to reach out to a whole lot of partners, and those partners are not necessarily all the same. You don't want to have echoes. You want to have challenges to ideas and to actively seek that. So, looking at the room here, a lot of the private sector people should be reaching out to municipalities and pushing us. I think that's a real value proposition.
I'll agree on the collaboration aspect completely. And to the point about sharing war stories, I think there's a lot of learning by doing going on right now. And I think of deep building retrofits. At the time we finished putting the 100% GHG reduction model together, we looked at what we had to do and oh my goodness, like how we do this. I can at least say it's much less daunting now. We're into doing a deep energy retrofit, and okay, we're not going to become oligarchs off of doing deep energy retrofits, but we're not going to, I don't think we're going to break the bank either. So that would be one example, just learning by doing and starting to feel more optimistic as a result.
I'm incredibly optimistic that, you have to live that way, and that's the way it needs to be. But knowing what you are does amazing things. So we know what we are, we know where we're going. And one of the most interesting, when I interviewed for the job I'm in right now, and I love the title because it's not an accoutrement. It's actually the director of sustainable economic development. They mean it. So I'm in the interview and I said, so what happens if $100 million development comes in your way and it doesn't fit what you want to be? What would you do? Oh, by the way, I was interviewed by a panel of my peers. So it wasn't just one person. And the answer is we turn it down. Understanding what you are really starts to drive the future. It's manifesting right now in, we have not pursued one new investment opportunity. They've come to us because of our identity and what we're doing. So understanding that your, contrived kind of pursuits don't really work, but, it's a cliche, but if you're disingenuous about what you're doing, you're not going to get it. But if you understand what you're doing and you actually pursue it with a purity, it's going to work.
Super.
I was just going to add too, I think, building on what Tim just said in terms of momentum, as your community either becomes known for something or projects are happening in your community, we're seeing now new opportunities emerge. And then they're really exciting private sector led opportunities, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be, building off what Algoma Steel's doing. We're seeing those opportunities come to the table, and it's very exciting because you can see the future of technology and the future of development as these projects come to be, and it gives me a lot of reason for optimism.
Sure. Thank you. Ashley?
Add that we need to continue to think outside the box, and that's happening. I especially see it happening at the municipal level. Let's push decision makers out of their comfort zones and think outside the box. And if you're ever nervous about it, you can talk to my boss, Scott DeMarc, who's the reason for our district thermal energy system. So
Yeah, I think there's lots of really inspirational and seasoned, I will call them, leaders out there who have done some really exciting initiatives at the community level. Communities that understand and have developed their culture and are sticking true to that are really where you need to be looking, right? If you're looking for where to deploy your technological solutions, that's what matters, right? Look for those communities that are already well down this path, that understand who they are, and they'll give you a quick answer, right? Like, yeah, that fits with us, or no, that doesn't. But it also behooves you to do the research to understand the community and what solutions they are likely in need of. I think this is a really important point, right? We can see the diversity of solutions out there. Those solutions fit in some places and they don't fit in others. And I think that's a really important point, right? We've got to have policy structures that enable the diversity of solutions, but we need to be strategic about where we try to deploy those solutions. Ultimately, communities are the pull. They're the ones that are going to pull us through to our net zero future. So anything that you can be doing to help communities get to net zero is what will get our country to net zero and what will get us globally to net zero.
I'm going to start with the people's choice. Or is that's what it is? Yeah, I'm going to start with the people's choice. So the people's choice, drum roll. Yes, they get 1 year membership in Decentralized Energy Canada, 2 tickets to the conference next year. And the winner is Moduli. Okay, second place will win a spot in our Valhalla deal screening process, a 1 year DEC Canada membership, and 2 tickets to the DEC conference next year, just announced in Halifax. And the company is Unico Power. Anyway, it was really close and everybody did a really good job. And so the winner will get 2 tickets to the DEC conference next year, 1 year DEC membership with a value of $500, pitched in front of our 200 investors at Valhalla Private Capital, and a $25,000 investment. And the winner is Ayrton Energy. Okay, so I was just, there was an investor that wasn't able to make the conference today. And he came and we sat over there and he writes minimum $1 to $2 million checks. And so I talked to him about the conference. I sent him a list of the companies and he's going to take a look at them too. And that's what you get for working with folks like us, because we're not just, we belong to a very, very large network. We're one of the first investors in SpaceX. So there you go. Guys, thank you so much. Thanks for sponsoring this. Another round of applause for Anouk and all of her team, and Crystal and everybody did an amazing, amazing job. And you guys with all your smart policy questions were amazing. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone, and safe trips back.